I think most Christians would say, man, how do I make a decision? How would you advise someone to make a decision in light of these things? You have
A large number of Christians find themselves unsure about what to do in this election. And with the election less than 2 weeks away, this is something that has to be talked about. Let's jump into the video.
I don't think it says any. I think we make that assumption, and we'd like to make that assumption, and partisans would like you to connect it to your faith so you don't move away from what they want you to do. But I don't think there should be that connection there at all. I think where you stand on the issues says more about your faith than anything else. And I can see issues, one side or the other that you may need to say, I can't rock with the Democrats on this. I gotta, choose a more, what some may consider a more conservative stance on an issue or a more progressive stance on an issue.
I mean, parties exist to win elections. I mean, that's their primary role. And this might bust people's brain, but these parties don't care about your values. They don't care. I used to say this all the time, that the Republican Party would throw abortion stances under the bus if it meant winning an election.
They just did that.
Just did that.
Yeah.
Just
we got
did
two
it.
pro.
I think this is really good. People get caught up on picking one side or the other. And for us as Christians, that just shouldn't be the case. We should have a lens that we filter things through. And that lens should not first be political. The question we as Christians need to ask ourselves is, do these policies reflect a Christian worldview? And when they don't, how do you navigate that? Neither one of the parties is Christian. So we have to evaluate the pros and the cons. The parties have shown us repeatedly that the most important thing for them to do is to win. It's interesting to see friends of mine who are very adamant about how the Republican Party was pro-life. So that's why they were sticking with them. But now that the Republican Party has shifted their position on this particular issue, they're still supporting them.
This life. And so the two are totally different in terms of how you should be approaching them.
And I would just add that I don't think, I've said this before, I don't think being in any party automatically makes you unfaithful. What makes you unfaithful is if you don't push back against that party when they are in the wrong. Right?
your own party. Or
your own party. So if you see Republicans, you're a Republican, you see, he may disagree with me on this, you see Republicans talking bad about immigrants, I think you need to say something. If you're a Democrat and you see a Democratic Party that basically acts like an unborn child doesn't exist, like it's not a part of the equation at all when you make a decision, you got to say something, push back against that. And I think those are the questions we should be asking, not simply what party you're in.
When you don't push back against the party that you're affiliated with, the party that you support or that you're rooting for, then that's when you are in the wrong, right? I think this hits the nail on the head. This is exactly how it should be. As Christians, we should be calling out whatever political party we support, but what they're trying to promote is wrong. This shows integrity, right? That we're not just out here defending everything that our party says or does, but that we are willing to call them out when their policies are unjust.
They were radical abolitionists. They were radical about liberty. And what I love about Abraham Lincoln, the first Republican president, is regardless of his diplomatic nuance and maneuvering, he was willing to burn this place down rather than have that institution survive. And that's the type of passion that that I have for liberty, that I want to have for liberty, that I aspire to have. And so I try to identify with the original Republicans.
This is my first time listening to Corey Roof, so I don't know much about him. I think he's had some really good takes in this conversation, and I plan on reading more of his work. That being said, this take pertaining to Abraham Lincoln, I don't think it's a good take. It's a shame that he has to defend his blackness, but to elevate Abraham Lincoln to some sort of status where he was really looking out for black people or slaves, it's just not what we see in history. In one of his writings, he says that if he didn't have to free any of the slaves and keep the unity of the nation, he would have done that. He signed a document because it was in the best interest of the North, not because he opposed slavery or because it was the right thing to do. Don't get me wrong. I think we're all glad that he did sign it, but I don't think that we should romanticize why he did it.
There's caricatures, I feel like, on both sides of the aisle. And I'm curious of y'all's perspective, because these caricatures tend to paint the picture for the general population of what it means to be a part of either party. You've got a caricature over here, you know, and they're waving the banner of, I mean, for all intents and purposes, is they're saying Trump is our guy, right? Trump, Trump, Trump. Not addressing character, not addressing his views on policies, any of those particular things. You got a banner over here that's saying, you know, LGBTQ, women have the right to choose. Mm-hmm. As a Christian, I look at both of these two particular things, and I think most Christians would say, man, how do I make a decision? How would you advise someone to make a decision in light of these things? You have a leader that people would say, I don't know if he aligns with my Christian ethics and values. And then you've got, on this side of the aisle, people who are championing, like, killing the unborn, right? Like, this is what we're moving on. How do you reconcile those particular things?
When you say, like, not enough emphasis is put on voting in the primary, when you do have an opportunity to pick the right person, because once the general happens, it's a binary choice. It's either this person or that person, and whoever becomes president is going to make 14,000 appointments. 14,000 faceless people running the country that you don't even know. And those people are going to be either progressive, or they're going to be conservative. They're going to be either Republican, or they're going to be Democrat. They're going to be whatever. And so, you know, where that party is nationally is also something that you have to take into consideration. But I think the big thing is, the most control you have is in the primary.
Yeah. And I think what you're getting at too, and I think you make an excellent point. What you're getting at too is, here we are right now.
Yeah.
What do I do right now?
What I do now?
Well, brother, your options are limited.
Thanks for that.
Just engaging.
Appreciate it.
If we're just engaging right now, we've already limited our options, because what you're saying, primary is better. And really, you want to get deep. You want to do something before. You want to be in organizations that are helping choose who's actually in the primary. But now we're here, right? And we have two candidates from the two major parties. We have some third-party candidates. And what I would tell people to do is list out your top 5 to 10 issues. What are the issues that you care about most, whether it's healthcare, whether it's economics, whether it's sanctity of life, criminal justice. List those out, and then do some research, do some due diligence. Usually this is best done in a community, not by yourself, to figure out who hits those the best, and then vote from there. Who hits the issues you care about most, who hits those best, go from there. It may be, you know, Kamala, it may be Trump, it may be a third party, it may be the American Solidarity Party, right? You got to make that choice. It's not an easy choice, but
the situation that we're in right now is tough. And I think that the advice that they offer is very helpful. I do agree about the primaries, but we've also seen how even when people are active in the primaries, the parties will still nominate whoever they think gives them the best option to win. Just think about what we just went through with Kamala and Biden. There was no vote to nominate her as the candidate. I mean, I understand why they did it, but being active in the primaries doesn't necessarily mean a different result. You could argue the same thing with Trump back in 2016, and even this election. They more or less were like, hey, this person will give us the best option to win. Let's continue to elevate them and push them forward. Personally, I strongly disagree with this take that at the general election, it becomes a binary choice. Even though I do get why they say that, the parties do their best to convince us that it is binary. And since to a degree that's all we know, then we fall for the lie that we have to pick one or the other. We're presented with this false dichotomy, which sometimes leads people to vote for the lesser of two evils. I don't think that's the best approach. I love Justin Giboney's point on listing or 5 to 10 top issues, ranking them, and doing so in community. Now, it's much easier to do this on your own, right? But when you factor in the community, it's going to help shed light on some of those blind spots that you may have. 2 big issues for me are sanctity of life and social justice. Now, when I say just social justice, I mean in the sense of the biblical approach, not in the sense that you have, the kind of like the far left progressive. Not the same thing. I don't think either of the two parties offer good policies on either of these issues, at least not for me. So I think for us as Christians, there's passages in scripture where you see this principle of not violating your conscience, right? And I think when it comes to voting, you want to vote in a way that's not violating your conscience. Now, I've heard some people, promote the idea of not voting, and I respect that. I understand if you find yourself in a situation where you feel like voting for either of the two parties is violating your conscience. I get it. So considering all of this, I would say, Justin said, look at the parties, right? Look at their platforms. So look what they're talking about. Like as I mentioned earlier in the video, we're getting close. I'm personally just not very comfortable right now as far as voting goes. I do intend to vote, just not sure yet. I'm still kind of doing my homework and kind of figuring some things out for me personally. I do like Justin mentioning the American Solidarity Party. If you're not familiar, I would recommend check out their platform. But I think we have to move past this idea that we have to pick one or the other. We collectively, right? Christians, not non-Christians, Americans, we complain every 4 years about the candidates that we have to choose from when it comes to voting for president, right? We complain they're not very good. We wish that we had better. But then when it comes time to vote, we pick one or the other. We have to let them know that, listen, we don't like this, right? And I think one of the ways we do that is by voting outside of either of those two options. Or, I mean, I know it's not popular, but if you think withholding your vote is the best course of action, listen, I respect it. But I think we have to stop falling for the lie that we have to pick one or the other. You don't. All right. There are other parties running. There are candidates that are not backed by a political group. And I get it. It's a long shot, right? Miss me if all this talk about, oh, you're splitting the vote or your vote doesn't really count. No. At the end of the day, you want to vote in a way that's consistent with your values, your beliefs, and your conscience. That's what I think we should strive for. And I think if more people were willing to do this, we would send the right kind of message to our government representatives that what you are doing is unacceptable and we want better. I hope this is helpful. Thanks for tuning in. I'll catch you next time.